I think it's just best if I start the stream now instead of like contemplating what do I say here? How should I say this? My name is Ramirez. This is FrogBear.zil. Today's stream, or at least today's topic, is the war has already been won. And what I mean in relation to the war has already been won, I'm primarily talking more about the culture war, and not just the culture war, because it's always a very difficult thing to explain, because it's not just one country, it's not just one nation, it's the entire facet of the world. Because I don't know how to explain this. This is why I fucking hate normal people, because it's like normal people want it to be nice, clean cut, a clear problem, a clear solution, and that goes into why I pity white people the most. And it's primarily because if anybody wants a nice, simple solution, it's these fucking idiots. And it's just like, well, Latin America wouldn't be so shit if XYZ. And it's just like, well, Latin America's shit because of all of the money interest, all of the cartels, all of the criminals, like the entire enterprise that literally was sprung up from the 80s and on, completely decimated certain parts of Latin America. Let's not even talk about Iran-Contra, which were CIA efforts in order to destabilize and reform politics of Latin America's region. So it's kind of like, oh, Latin America's such a shithole, but it's like, well, are you acknowledging the fact that there were these other past events, these other past markers that completely shaped that country to be the way it is? Maybe it's shit because the powers that be kind of molded it to be like shit and encouraged all this other shitty behavior. It's just one aspect of things, right? Because it's the easiest one I can use, especially for Americans. But when it comes down to the Franco-Syrian War, right? This is great. It's like understanding that there are wants, needs, demands that aren't necessarily quenchable by like consumer means. And by that I mean, like, why would the UN go out of their way to go meet the sultans, to go meet everyone in the Middle East, just to backstab them later and be like, yo, France, yo, Britain, you want this shit? It's free. Like, how are you going to just suspend your disbelief in that? So when I say the war is won, I'm like, every single facet of whatever civil war we're going through, and by civil, I do not mean by the bounds of any one nation. It is all over the world that we are seeing a war between civilians and organized government institution, conglomeracies, bodies of people, lobbyist groups, whatever special interest groups we're talking about. There is a clear divide between the civil world, and that's kind of a very difficult classification, because as sad as it is, Antifa and people who are still caught up in this matrix would be considered a part of that civilian world. And right, the fact that one group of these people is far larger than the other group of people always astonishes me. But back to it. The war, by the war, I mean, oh man, that's really large. Because I'm encompassing public opinion, I'm encompassing institutions, I'm encompassing schools, I'm encompassing any subculture divisions, and those are very wide and large, right? Like, even when I'm... So, like, for example, by, like, subculture divisions, actually, I kind of do want to talk about that. So there was this lady, can't remember her name, but she was the person in lead of Project Camelot. You could still find her stuff, and you could still find all her videos, right? I'm not going to say that it's completely wiped off the internet, but a lot of it has been wiped off the internet. YouTube, by and large, Like you actually have to go out of your way to find a lot of this Project Camelot sort of stuff. And Project Camelot touches on a different side of human history that by and large will always be rejected by the profane world. And there's a reason why I'm saying this is because we aren't entirely given the whole truth when it comes to space, when it comes to um, our bodies, when it comes to, how do I say, there's a variety of things that we would like to assume are normal, mundane. Like you can, it's a very physical world aspect, right? Like magic doesn't exist, this doesn't exist, the ethereal, this or that, realms, right? All of that paranormal stuff will always get tossed to the wayside. But if you've followed Project Camelot, if you've just listened to any of your interviews, if you've done any meaningful research into some of the individuals that she actually interviews, you get led down a very different understanding of human history because you know what I mean? Like why would a government, why would black budget programs, why would this much money get allocated? Why would they go through the trouble of funding construction, this, that, right? Like there's a lot of hoops somebody's got to jump over when it's just like, oh man, telekinesis is stupid. I know that the government spent like over 22 billion in it, but it doesn't work. It's not real. Government will spend money on stupid shit, and it's just like, yo, dog. Like, did you even read the experiment? Like, did you even look into any meaningful documentation of what happened? Because usually, what you end up finding out, a lot of these projects were discontinued, but it's nowhere in, like, especially if they were very successful projects, it's nowhere in the documentation that says, oh, we decided to grow a heart. Our heart grew 3 times as large. And then we decided not to continue these experiments because they were inhumane. Nobody says these things out loud. But literally, this is why I say I pity white people, because they're the type of people to say that. They're the type of people to be like, oh no, I believe in a very nice, comfortable world where only good things happen. Not to disparage like a whole like and to generalize a whole wave of people, but that's what you're saying. When you aren't wording exactly what you're saying what is being said for you. And the reason why I say that way is because we're taught to respond certain ways. Like especially the populace of America, you're taught to repeat what to say. You're taught to repeat what to understand. You don't really have, how do I say, original thoughts. Like you're not taught the concept. You're taught the answer to the concept. Does that make more sense? So when I when I look at this Project Camelot stuff, and when I really map out and actually look at the not just the surface of it, but I understand at least whatever research project it was, what purpose did it serve, what angle does it fit in the giant puzzle of like, right? I'm mapping out the world in a way that would make sense, right? Like it's kind of funny. That's kind of required when you make a map, right? You need you need the little icon things on the side. You need somebody to understand distance to a meaningful degree. And right, the prevailing marker here with paranormal is there's a lot of money. A lot of money. We'd like to think that the world is as normal as it is, but why would the government then go out of their way to spend all of the money to rewrite everything about it? And not just to rewrite, to leave half truths. And then, if you look at one of the if you look at one of the more prevailing tactics that was born from black budget programs, and when they were trying to escape FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, all they essentially did was they just started handing out the contract to a completely different entity. And then they even started obfuscating to those employees what they were actually doing. So there could be this private firm that's handling some crazy ass experiments, and their employees aren't even aware that from beginning to end they're a government venture. And because it's a third private company, it's an LLC, or it fits into these corporate laws, you then can't ask for a FOIA request. You can't ask them, like, what were you researching? What did your research entail? Because it's a private company, right? So there is this other levels, right? There was an action, there was a reaction, and now we're living in the conclusion. The reaction was, we want to know what you're doing. Okay, we'll tell you what we're doing. All right, everybody, we're going to hide everything we're doing now. And people are like, oh no, that wouldn't happen. We live in a great society. We live in a great world. They would never do such things. That's too evil. Like, seriously, I need people to word everything they're fucking saying, because it's just like, this is how much the suspense of disbelief occurs in normal people's heads. And that's just the paranormal stuff, right? Like, when it comes down to, like, enhanced interrogation, which is straight up just torture, like, either way, what I did want to get to was this video clip, which actually I might have to switch scenes because I don't know where I put it. Okay. It'd be easier for me to do it this way. Oh, look, I thought a bit in advance. I didn't think that far in advance. Work? Yeah, it works. Yay! Oh, dude, that's the mode. Arms crossed. Okay. I should probably open this first. So something that I've learned about the media viewer in Telegram, for whatever reason, Telegram will open up a whole other like window, and it's called the media viewer. You gotta like reset it every time you want to show a video clip or something like that. All right, so I think this is from X-Files, but the main reason why I want to highlight it is because it summarizes two very different perspectives of the war, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's like a work of art. It's like poetry, my boy.
The tentacles reach far back into the last century. But it wasn't until victories in Europe and Japan and the onset of the Cold War that political and economic conditions became perfect for actual execution. A conspiracy bigger and more secret than the Manhattan Project.
More odious and far-reaching.
No sooner had we defeated Germany than a new threat started appearing in.
It's under the assumption that we defeated Germany, which I don't believe. Very nicely. Okay. I fixed the audio. What was I gonna say? Oh, I said the Germans. I said that the Germans didn't lose, but then I was like, no, it's not that we won against the German nation, but like whoever organized the German nation to rally in that way, we didn't defeat them. Like, essentially we absorbed them, or I don't know, the way I look at it is like from beginning to end it was completely financed and organized by American corporation and Jesuits, but that's just me.
Skies over America, drawn to Earth by the latest threat to extinction, the H-bomb. Explosions acting as transducers, drawing alien life forms through wormholes in spaceships using electrogravitic propulsion. Advanced extraterrestrial species visiting us.
You know, this gets into like Parson, like the guy who is like JJ something Parson, like the guy who invented jet propulsion, or the guy who supposedly invented jet propulsion and like modern avionics. A lot of that theory goes that all of that technology was already figured out by the Germans, and what they were really working on were you know, like flying saucers and all this other stuff. But that theory is like hella old, and that's not even original to this TV show.
In technology and biochemistry. Classified studies were done at military installations S4, Groom Lake, Wright-Patterson, and Dulce. Extracting alien tissue. Tests were done on unsuspecting human subjects. And elaborately staged abductions. In craft using alien technology recovered from the patient.
Imagine a government hiding, hoarding alien.
Okay, that was the paranormal aspect of things. Like, me personally, I still don't believe anything about space. So, like, I can account for all of the theories that exist for space. I can account for all the theories that will exist for the argument of any other meaningful explanation, from flat Earth to aliens to dimensions to stargates to this to that. I'll entertain all of the ideas, but it's a venture that is fucking impossible to make right now, especially if you don't have the money, the backing. The only thing I can really put my finger to, point at, and be like, this is where I find it very impossible for me to suspend my disbelief, right, is when I compare Elon Musk's spaceship rockets compared to every other rocket. Just compare it to every other rocket, and you'll realize that this rocket is doing something far different than all of these other rockets. So why does his rocket do that funny thing at the second part, right? Like there's like it actually gives you something that looks like it's breaking through and entering a completely, right? Like there is all I'm saying is visually and from what I can see, Elon Musk's rocket does something very different when it breaks out of the atmosphere. That's all I'm saying. Meanwhile, NASA and any other venture that's tried space or tried to explain space either has Satanist, Scientologist, Jesuits, or this really weird monopoly thing of, oh, you can only do it through this very specific means. That's when I'm like, okay, this is very fishy. I don't believe.
It's the missing piece.
But it's not hard to imagine war. And then the world itself, by any means necessary, however violent, or cruel, or efficient. By severe drought, brought on by weather wars, conducted secretly using aerial contaminants and high-altitude electromagnetic waves.
And you know, it's funny, like, that theory, when I first discovered it, was when here in California, Paradise City burned. And I just did some loose, meaningful research only to get into some really weird documentation from PG&E. Like PG&E is like the electric company here in LA. And what I discovered was like, oh, this theory is really stupid, but you know, we do have a satellite that is in the air that does that. And we do have a satellite dish in Northern California that does receive that essentially it absorbs sun rays, then it beams it down to a satellite dish here in order for it to get converted into electricity. So it's like, whoa. First you say that this is the dumbest thing ever and that this could never exist. But in that same fucking thing, you'll mention and make reference to this satellite that is actually owned by PG&E, which is owned by some Rothschild that has this capability. Like, dude, I read that and I was like, okay. I wanted to, right? And this was at the beginning of my searching, like the beginning stages of me researching all this, because this wouldn't, right? I'm still hanging out with Wild Smile. Just to really see, right? Because that's when I got really invested. So I just kept watching the back and forth between talking heads and research heads. The researchers found something new, they'd bring it up. And there was always a reaction from the institution to what was going on here. And that to me was like, hold on. That only happens when somebody's being actively paid to be on these boards. Like, I remember Think Blue. I remember 2016, and like, you know what I mean? Like, you would literally encounter people that were just reading off of paper. Like, they either way.
In a state of perpetual war, to create problem, reaction, solution scenarios to distract, enrage, and enslave American citizens at home.
And it wasn't just American citizens, right? It was This is why I say it's not just America. America was the biggest place of complacency in the sense that the simulation was the hardest. That means you were given everything, so you were given conditions good enough that you would never ask questions, that you would just lull yourself back into this rhythm of living life. But this complacency was also around everywhere else. Like everywhere else has, to some degree, that level of complacency where life goes on, everybody does life accordingly, and that's why the George Bush era to me was so scary, because he's a Skull and Bones member, right? The way I see it was, that's terrifying how squeaky clean and how greased the wheels can be when you have people who really know how to maintain that woo woo. Terrifying stuff. That's why I believe that it just started failing, was because all their children were shit at doing this.
Rules like the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act, which abridge the Constitution in the name of national security. The militarization of police forces in cities across the U.S., the building of prison camps by the Federal Emergency Management Agency with no stated purpose.
Right? Okay, so that was like the 2011 FEMA camps. That was a different time in my life, because I was still watching like Alex Jones, and like it made no real sense to me why that mattered. But dude, Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of Defense at that time. Like, if anybody was writing up or drawing up divisions in order to have an idea of how any of this was working out, it was her department that, not her department, but it was during her time as the Secretary of Defense that she could have approved all of these things. And when you get into like black budget stuff, and when you get into, what was it, the 16-year plan to destroy America, like there was it, I don't know, there was this prevailing theory that the Obama years and the Hillary Clinton years were going to be used for the specific purpose of designing the destruction of this country. And you could just look at what Obama did with firing, removing, restructuring parts of the military. His egregious actions towards spying on everybody, figuring out their most inner, right? Like, he just basically did intel operations against every single military officer, and anyone that he didn't really agree with, ideologically specifically, he would fire them, i.e. why he fired General Michael Flynn in 2015. There's so much into this that it's like, this war is so large, so vast, and affects so many aspects of life that people would find it very difficult to comprehend that it's a very fucked up world. And I don't know how to say it, but to some degree, like, you have to remember the people that we're looking at now who clutch the hardest into trusting the Democrats, into trusting their narrative, into trusting the news. Those were the people that were going to drag everyone out of their house and put them in these FEMA camps. Those were the people that were going to sell you out. Those were the people, like, that's why it gets me so sad when I think about it, because it's like, you don't realize this, but if the world worked out the other way around, it would have been my own family to lock me up because I had different thoughts, right? And I was somebody that got into heated debates with my sister because she was a Hillary Clinton voter. So, you know what I mean? Like, shit. I quantify these thoughts.
The corporate takeover of food and agriculture, pharmaceuticals and healthcare, even the military in clandestine agendas to fatten, dull, sicken, and control a populace already consumed by consumerism.
And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
A government that taps your phone, collects your data, and monitors your whereabouts with impunity. A government preparing to use that data against you when it strikes. And the final takeover begins.
And the final takeover begins. And his explanation of what a final takeover is hilarious. Because it's like, I don't know, the way I see it, there's only been one group of people that have been saying this very specific narrative, and it isn't Charles Schwab, and it isn't any of these other... Well, let's continue.
The takeover of America.
By a well-oiled and well-armed multinational group of elites that will cull, kill, and subjugate.
The World Economic Forum is an aspect of it, right? Because like, didn't they have their own like militia that protected that whole area?
Happening as we sit here.
It's happening all around us.
The other shoe waiting to drop.
It'll probably start on a Friday. The banks will announce a security action necessitating their computers to go offline all weekend.
And that right there was like, damn, that's literally it. That's literally it. My boy got it. Hitting the push to talk's nice and all, but my keyboard's over there. I don't want to be like, crazy. Absolutely crazy, right? Why I love certain... You can't beat good writing. Like, you really can't. Like, you really can't. So whoever wrote that script or whoever wrote that portion absolutely did a phenomenal job with disseminating the information in a fantastic, meaningful way. Because I don't think anybody else would have anybody else would have not worded that so perfectly. Because it describes two different sides to what we're actually seeing. Like the explanation of the aliens and the aliens coming to save us because of the H-bomb or whatever. I don't know about that. There's a lot of theories about the Greys. I don't know about that. All I know is not to trust space, not to trust NASA, not to trust the Jesuits, not to trust the scholarly education system. Just because it's like, you've made a den of vipers. I don't know why I said it that way. Like, you've made a den of vipers. Den of vipers. Den of vipers. I don't know. And then you expect me to trust these fucking assholes? You expect me to trust these assholes when they're like internally backstabbing one another? When they're internally having like squabbles and like, I don't know, because I think about Dr. Malone, and his explanation of when he was working at the Salk Institute, and he gave descriptions of his boss and the controversies that he was in, but because of who he was, because of the position that he had, and because of the repertoire that he established, he was untouchable. Like, he could... I don't even want to go into that. But, right, this asymmetrical warfare is everywhere. It isn't just in the schools. It could be as mundane as somewhere as the Hoover Dam. The levers of control only really matter in the decision-making capabilities and the authority that is established by whatever job it is, right? So that's why I always mention the Secretary of Defense being Hillary Clinton. What powers does that guarantee you? What does that title come with? And nobody asks these questions. That's why I won't. I'll go far enough, but I won't. It's like, no, you gotta learn. If you don't want to learn, I know that this conversation's useless, and people would be like, well, that just means you're admitting defeat. It's just like, yeah, whatever, dude. I've seen that often enough. And that's just, all right, so paranormal, and then the normal, which is, you know, satellites, the food being poisoned, the air being poisoned, the water being poisoned. They're turning the freaking frogs gay. Like, dead ass. Like, oh, and here's what nobody actually paid attention to that. Nobody's ever talked about this. The micro penis thing. So, oh my god, my tiny dick. I got a tiny dick. I personally don't. Ooh, he's just saying that to say that. You want me to call my ex? I'm joking. No, I do not want to talk to any of them. But what was it? Yeah, there was that documentary. Who was it? It was the black dude. It was some black dude who was doing research on frogs, and he was the one that basically figured out that this chemical was turning the frogs into hermaphrodites, and like to some degree that the frog I don't know. He described this really weird thing about frogs and how like some of them were turning gay and this and that. And but one of the things that nobody actually picked up on was that as a side effect in humans, it could develop micropenis syndrome. And I'm like, what did you just say? Like, you mean if people drink this water, they could get micropenises? Like, that shit freaked me out. And I don't know. Nobody ever talked about that. Nobody ever meaningfully had that discussion, and I can completely understand why. But fuck, this is gonna be an interesting one because I remember a study talking about, it was some stupid ass thing, more of a meme than anything, but it was talking about growers versus showers. And the only reason why I remember this article is because it then linked me to what's his, I know his name, I know the dude's name, the dude's name is Janice. And the reason why I thought this shit was hilarious is because if you know what a Janny is, so finding somebody with the name Janice is hilarious. But his whole channel was talking about penis and the penis as a muscle and the understanding, the actual understanding of a phallic member. But what makes Janice really special is that he set out a goal. He set out the goal to see if you could get a bigger dick. And it's fucking hilarious. Cause like, by and large, this nigga figured out the formula, right? There's somebody on YouTube with the formula to get you. It won't grow substantially large, but it will fill out just the same way that the human body has an ideal image. So does your phallic member. I'll leave it at that because this is already a weird ass discussion for a weird ass portion of science that I wanted to discuss about chemicals that give people micropenises. But yeah, nobody ever talks about that. About, you know, the poisoning of the world, this and that, chemicals in the air, turning the frog gay. Really weird tangent. I always like talking about that because, like, dude, there's a guy on the internet whose whole channel, his whole existence, it's like, what the? And he treats it like a science, like he actually treats it like a science experiment. He has pictures, he has a Reddit, all sorts of crazy shit. That's how I discovered my secret. I endorsed this message. No, I'm joking. Fucking retarded now. I have nothing else to say. It's like the end of the thing. All I did here. Thanks for watching. This your boy Ramirez. Stay woke. No, stop it.